You may begin, sir.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Grijalva, and Mr. Bishop. Thank you all so much for doing this. Appreciate y'all being here. So you have my prepared statement that I gave earlier, but I'm going to expand on that a little bit. I'm back home in the district, and I'm talking to folks, and I go to this very small county. It's more than 50% national park, and in my district, which has 22 counties and 7 independent cities, we have two. We have George Washington and the Jefferson National Forest, so big chunks of a lot of my rural counties are in the National Forest. It's one of the reasons I ended up in the Western Caucus as an affiliate member or whatever my title is, but it's because I have a lot of similarities with a lot of the states out west. So I'm in there, and they're talking about closing in Craig County the Fenwick Mine Day Use Area. And I'm like, well, why? Well, they need maintenance. It needs maintenance, and it needs money. And it's not used much according to the National Forest Service. So let me deal with that first. National Forest Service says it's not used much because they base the usage on how many people call up in advance and reserve the shelter. Well, nobody in our area calls up in advance to reserve the shelter. They show up, and whoever gets there first gets to use the shelter, and everybody else uses areas around the shelter. And it doesn't seem to be a problem, but the National Forest Service thinks that the only way that if you're not really there unless you call and tell them you're there. So that's problem number one. Problem number two is the maintenance can be handled locally. The county administrator shared with me that he told them that he would be more than happy to have, some group come in, a roofing company, if they needed a roof put back on, plumbers, whatever, they'd be happy to help. When he approached the National Forest about this, they said, we can't do that. We'd have to have people there to monitor the volunteers and to watch the volunteers. Folks, this is crazy. We've got to get them to understand, and I think it's probably the lawyers, that if you sign a waiver, and most of the people in Southwest Virginia would sign a waiver, if you sign a waiver of negligence, the Park Service doesn't have anything to worry about. The Forest Service doesn't have anything to worry about. And my colleague from Colorado was talking about opening up more ski areas. How do you think ski companies operate in this country? You put people on these wooden platforms or composite platforms that are very narrow, and they slide them down a big hill with lots of slippery stuff. Everybody signs a waiver before they go out, and it works perfectly fine. I don't know why our Forest Service isn't doing it. But wait, maybe you think that the people of Southwest Virginia aren't capable of doing this kind of stuff. So we make, in my district, we make all the Volvo trucks made in North America. If you see the Slash, it was made in my district. They asked Sweden for money to build a test bed road, a test road, so that when people came in with fleet purchasers and they wanted to buy a fleet of trucks, they could test it out right there on the plant in Dublin, Virginia. Sweden said, no, it'll be too expensive. Somebody dropped a note in the suggestion box. Hey, have you asked the workers here in the plant if they can build the road? Plant manager said yes. Unlike the Forest Service, plant manager said yes. They found out who they had in the plant. They built the road for approximately $100,000. The people in our area know that you've got to get things done. I have a agricultural research center. They said, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. I said, have you gotten estimates on what that costs? He said, we'll just ask the farm hands that work here. It's amazing. They can do everything we need done, and it's all built to code. So the Forest Service needs to get out of the way and let these people do what they need to do. And then to add insult to injury while I'm home, it's announced that the Flatwoods Job Corps Civilian Conservation Center has been transferred to the Department of Labor, and the Department of Labor has slated it for closure. That's in Coburn, Virginia. It's a long way away from the Fenwick mines, but it's the same problem. These folks train individuals on how to do practical things, and they help the Forest Service keep maintenance up. So on the one hand, we're saying we won't accept volunteers, and then on the other hand, we're closing down one of the facilities that helps in another part of the district, helps the Forest Service do maintenance. I know that there's money that's necessary as well. I'm not saying this is a substitute for money in some cases, but our folks can do all kinds of things, and they're not being given the ability to do so. They're not being allowed to do so. They want to keep the Fenwick mine open. There's lots of other facilities. The hunters want to keep some of these trails open. And the people in my district, and I suspect all across the country, I suspect Mr. Tipton's district as well, they could do some of that maintenance, and they're willing to do it. Get the government out of the way. Let the volunteers help the government keep these national forests open for the public who actually attend, notwithstanding the fact they didn't call the Forest Service in advance to tell them that they were going to be there. I appreciate your time, and I yield back.
Thank you very much, Mr. Griffin. Mr. Bishop. A couple of things, Morgan. First of all, are fees paid by those who are using the shelter and the other areas? Do they pay a fee to the Forest Service?
Sorry, this particular shelter, no. Now, they are talking about raising the fees, and I could talk about that too. It's some of my others where they do pay fees. Generally, it's on an honor basis, and they've been asking for $3. They probably should have raised it to $5 a number of years ago. Now they're talking and jumping it from $3 to $8. That'll be a shock to the system, but in a number of these types of facilities, fees are paid. At this one, I don't believe there are any fees paid, but people are more than happy to donate their time. You know, I represent a fairly not wealthy district, a fairly, economically stressed area, but folks are hands-on, and they would go in there and take care of it. You just give them permission to do it, and they'll do it.
This committee actually does have the jurisdiction over fees. It's one of those areas, it's been a long-standing problem that we should deal with. The importance of if fees are actually assessed, they should, at least in my mind, 90% should go back to the area to improve that area in which those fees are collected. But it also sounds like you really have a problem simply in dealing with the Forest Service, that if you would like to talk with any of us as well off this committee, we'll privately talk with you with the Forest Service and see if we can. It would be nice if you could legislate that the government has to be logical. That's never happened. But we can actually talk to the Forest Service and say, here you have a local problem where local decisions are being done. One of the problems I think this committee faces all the time is if you want to talk about access to public lands. And let's face it, if you don't have access, there's no reason to have public lands in the first place. It is oftentimes the national government that is the first one to actually close that access. That's another issue we as a committee can look like, but you have a parochial issue, and I would pledge to work with you, working directly with the Department of Agriculture and the Forest Service to try and solve this parochial problem.
And I appreciate that, and it may have been something I would have come to you off record about anyway, but the same day I was meeting, I got this request from my committee, hey, would you like to go talk to Natural Resources? I said, you bet I would, because I had just gotten fired up in the local county with this problem. I'm like, yeah, I'd like to talk to them, and I appreciate your offer to help offline, and I'll be glad to take you up on that.
We'll do that, and thank you for coming, and we can blame Grijalva for you having to do this, right?
Hey, I don't know that we can blame anybody, but I'm just glad to get some help in trying to fix it.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate your time.